Imagine me suggesting that a household of 6 could cultivate food for a full year using less space than your living area. The Amish have achieved precisely this for generations, employing clever methods that most contemporary gardeners haven't found. While the typical American discards 30% of their groceries, Amish communities let less than 3% go to waste, all while cultivating food in areas most would deem impossibly constrained. These 20 Amish practices might reshape your perspective on food self-reliance, even if your available space is just a small backyard or patio. The Amish method for garden planning. Cultivating sufficient food to sustain a family for 12 months might appear an insurmountable challenge, particularly when dealing with restricted space. Nevertheless, the Amish have mastered this skill through generations of meticulous planning and deliberate cultivation. Their strategy isn't merely about planting seeds and hoping for favorable outcomes. It's a systematic approach that commences well before the initial seedling enters the soil. When laying out their gardens, Amish families initiate the process by determining their precise food needs derived from caloric requirements. This isn't some elaborate mathematical equation. It's as straightforward as recognizing that an average adult requires approximately 2,000 calories per day, and then identifying which crops yield the highest nutrition per square foot. A family of 4 might necessitate roughly 250 lbs of potatoes, 100 lbs of beans, and 75 lbs of corn to satisfy their carbohydrate demands for the year. One of the most noteworthy elements of Amish garden planting is their 10-minute routine that effectively doubles output in compact gardens. Numerous Amish farmers utilize only a sheet of paper and a pencil to outline their entire year's food provision. Most individuals plant according to preference, not necessity. But when you chart out your meals for just a single week and multiply by 52, the genuine figures suddenly become clear. The Amish exercise meticulousness in preventing food wastage. In contrast to our modern habit of excessive purchasing at supermarkets, they plan harvest amounts down to the final preserve container. If a household can only process 10 bushels of tomatoes before spoilage occurs, then cultivating enough for 15 bushels is simply inefficient. This careful equilibrium between preservation capability and planting scale guarantees that nothing is wasted. Amish families also integrate seasonal planting that considers crop rotation and soil vitality. Their planting schedules frequently cover a 3-year period, enabling them to monitor which crops deplete specific nutrients and which replenish them. Like tiny homestead layout design. Have I ever made you consider how Amish families succeed in extracting so much productivity from seemingly limited areas? Their key resides in the organization of their homesteads. While traditional Amish properties may not match the scale of commercial farms, every square inch fulfills a function within their carefully conceived layouts. Sun mapping practices provide the groundwork for Amish garden design. Amish cultivators observe their land across various seasons, taking note of how sunlight traverses their property. They position tall structures and plants along the northern boundary of their gardens, while shorter plants are situated towards the south. This elementary practice stops taller plants from shading shorter ones. Establishing microclimates is another Amish expertise that prolongs growing seasons without intricate technology. By strategically placing stone walls or water barrels, they generate pockets of warmth that shield delicate plants from early spring frosts or late autumn chills. Some Amish gardeners arrange dark-hued stones around heat-loving plants like peppers and eggplants during daylight hours. These stones absorb sunlight, and during the night, they gradually release that accumulated heat. The incorporation of animal housing into the garden ecosystem demonstrates the Amish grasp that nothing ought to exist separately. Chicken coops situated near compost heaps permit birds to scratch through the materials, accelerating decomposition while discovering insects. Rabbit hutches positioned over garden beds offer direct fertilization, and even shelters for goats and cows are placed to form windbreaks protecting fragile plants. Amish homestead designs also feature water management systems that gather rainfall and channel it to where it is most required, Basic swales trace the natural contours of the terrain, decelerating water flow and enabling it to seep into the soil instead of running off. Rain barrels located at the corners of buildings collect roof runoff, supplying irrigation water during arid spells. The Amish soil management system. When examining genuinely productive gardens, the conditions beneath the surface are paramount. For generations, Amish communities have refined soil management techniques that convert even subpar ground into fertile cultivation space. Their methods don't depend on costly commercial products, but instead utilize materials readily accessible on any homestead. The core of Amish soil enhancement is their renowned 18-day compost formula, whereas conventional composting might require months. This expedited method yields rich, dark material in under 3 weeks. The procedure involves layering green materials, such as fresh grass clippings, with brown materials like dried leaves or straw in precise proportions. Sustaining adequate moisture, roughly as damp as a wrung-out sponge, and turning the pile every 3 days establishes optimal conditions for decomposition. This rapidly prepared compost introduces beneficial microorganisms that foster living soil abundant with microscopic collaborators. Was I aware that coffee grounds could increase garden yields by as much as 30%? The Amish realized this long before coffee shops became ubiquitous. They gather used grounds and apply them purposefully around specific crops. Blueberries, strawberries, and tomatoes especially benefit from the mild acidity and nitrogen infusion the grounds offer. The grounds also attract earthworms while discouraging certain pests, addressing multiple garden issues with one simple substance. The next time I brew coffee, I should remember those grounds are horticultural gold. Even within the most restricted growing areas, Amish gardeners employ cover crop strategies. Instead of leaving soil exposed between plantings, they sow rapidly growing crops like buckwheat or clover that can be incorporated into the soil just weeks later. These green manures avert erosion, inhibit weeds, and introduce organic matter exactly where needed. In diminutive spaces, they might employ cut and drop techniques rather than tilling the soil, simply cutting the cover crops at ground level and permitting the roots to decompose underground while the tops serve as immediate mulch. The Amish methodology reminds us that fertile soil isn't fabricated. It's nurtured through careful observation and patience. By nourishing the soil rather than solely the plants, they establish growing environments that grow progressively more productive each season instead of becoming depleted. Foundation crops for small spaces. When area is restricted but sustenance is essential, selecting the appropriate initial plants is crucial. The Amish have honed the skill of choosing foundation crops that not only nourish families, but also condition the soil for subsequent plantings. Their strategy transforms constraints into benefits through purposeful planting. Beans lead the list of essential starter crops in Amish gardens. These adaptable plants nourish both humans and the soil concurrently. A single bush bean plant during a favorable season can yield up to half a pound of beans, sufficient for several family meals, while its roots establish symbiotic relationships with soil bacteria that capture atmospheric nitrogen. This complementary fertilizer stays in the soil post-harvest, benefiting the subsequent crop. As one Amish farmer articulated, chemical fertilizer is like coffee for your plants, works great until the crash comes. Rapidly growing soil builders secure their position in compact Amish homesteads through their multitasking capabilities. Radishes reach maturity in merely 25 to 30 days, offering a harvestable crop while their roots penetrate compacted soil. Their swift growth also suppresses potential weeds, resolving 3 garden challenges simultaneously. Buckwheat blossoms can revitalize a garden plot in just 6 weeks, attracting vital pollinators, while its roots release compounds that enhance phosphorus availability for future crops. When incorporated into the soil, buckwheat decomposes quickly, enriching the soil just in time for autumn plantings. Timing is as critical as crop choice in the Amish system. Foundation crops are not planted haphazardly, but adhere to meticulously planned rotations that maximize soil enhancement while ensuring continuous harvests. Peas might be planted as soon as the soil is workable in early spring, feeding the family by early summer before the space transitions to heat-tolerant crops. Following summer harvests, fast-growing greens like arugula or spinach utilize the final warm days while their roots anchor the soil through winter precipitation. The Amish principle of commencing with soil-building crops instead of immediately planting heavy feeders like corn or tomatoes guarantees sustainable production year after year, converting small areas into perpetual food generators. The chicken integration system. Sustainable gardens do not function in isolation. They are integral components of a living system. Within Amish communities, chickens fulfill a vital function in garden prosperity. Unlike modern practices that segregate animals from plants, the traditional Amish approach interweaves them in a cooperative interaction that advantages both. Seasonal grazing timetables constitute the foundation of the Amish chicken integration system. As gardens progress through their annual cycle, chickens are intentionally relocated to various areas at particular times. Following the harvest, birds consume fallen fruits and vegetables while foraging for insects. During spring soil preparation, chickens are briefly permitted in garden zones to scratch up nascent weed seedlings and search for grubs. Complementary pest management accompanied by breakfast. Water systems on Amish homesteads fulfill multiple functions. Ingenious designs enable chicken waterers to concurrently irrigate nearby plants. Slightly raised platforms featuring waterers at the center allow surplus moisture to drip directly onto the plants beneath. During sweltering summer months, this dual-function system can decrease watering requirements by up to 25% compared to distinct systems. Various chicken breeds contribute differing quantities of nitrogen to the soil. Heritage breeds typically deposit between 0.5 and 1.5 pounds of nitrogen per bird annually, a notable contribution in confined areas. Amish farmers choose breeds such as Buckeyes and Dominiques, not solely for egg-laying, but also for their vigorous foraging habits that distribute manure more uniformly. Noise control becomes significant on smaller homesteads, particularly for those with adjacent neighbors. Amish families frequently construct co-ops with additional wall insulation, which diminishes early morning crowing volume by as much as 60%. One elderly Amish farmer observed that a rooster that doesn't disturb the neighbors is invaluable. The practical sense of maintaining harmony with surrounding people while preserving traditional customs exemplifies the balanced Amish methodology. Intensive square-foot gardening. Optimizing food output in minimal space is not solely a contemporary issue. It has been an Amish specialty for generations. Their version of intensive gardening converts tiny plots into extraordinarily productive growing areas through meticulous planning and planting density. The grid system utilized by traditional Amish gardeners precedes today's popular square-foot gardening techniques by numerous decades. Garden beds usually measure 4 ft in width, just narrow enough to access the center from either side without treading on the soil. These beds are mentally segmented into 1 ft squares, with each square allocated a specific quantity of plants based on their mature dimensions. Research has indicated that intensive planting methods can boost yields by 300 to 400% relative to conventional row gardening. The crucial factor is appropriate spacing that maximizes soil utilization while still affording each plant adequate room. Lettuce planted in rows might yield 5 heads in a specific area, whereas the same area employing intensive spacing could produce 20 heads. Staggered planting schedules facilitate continuous harvests in Amish gardens. Instead of sowing an entire crop simultaneously, seeds are planted in small increments every week or two. This succession planting guarantees a consistent supply rather than an abrupt surplus, followed by scarcity. A square foot that cultivates spinach in April might transition to beans in June and subsequently fall carrots in August, 3 separate crops from the identical small area. Plant selection for efficient space utilization involves opting for varieties cultivated for compact growth. The Amish preserve seed collections of vegetables that yield well in confined spaces. Bush varieties of beans and cucumbers remain relatively compact while still providing ample harvests. Even corn can be cultivated intensively with suitable varieties. Vertical growing revolution. Space transforms into a valuable commodity when my garden area is restricted. Conventional rows simply fail to yield enough food on a diminutive homestead. This is where cultivating upwards instead of outwards transforms the situation. The vertical methods perfected by Amish gardeners over generations maximize every square inch while actually diminishing upkeep. Constructing trellises from minimal resources is characteristic of Amish ingenuity. Uncomplicated structures employing just a few wooden stakes and some twine can sustain surprising quantities of produce. The traditional A-frame design, prevalent in many Amish gardens, offers two growing surfaces while necessitating few materials. Plants grown vertically benefit from improved airflow around their foliage, naturally decreasing fungal diseases by up to 60% compared to the same crops cultivated on the ground. Harvesting also becomes simpler, no more searching through sprawling vines for that concealed cucumber. The Three Sisters technique has been employed for centuries, but Amish gardeners have modified it for vertical space effectiveness. Corn stalks function as natural supports for climbing beans while squash spreads beneath, shading the soil and suppressing weeds. In areas as compact as 3ft by 3ft, this companion planting strategy can yield 20 pounds of food, approximately 10 times what the identical space would generate with conventional single-crop plantings. Climbing plants generate remarkable yields when adequately supported. A single pole bean plant can ascend 8 to 10 ft and yield up to 4 pounds of beans in a favorable season. Cucumber yields typically double when cultivated vertically, rather than permitted to sprawl. The key lies not merely in the support structures, but in proper training methods. Amish gardeners inspect their vertical crops regularly, gently directing new growth onto supports and pinching back superfluous vegetation. These brief minutes of upkeep each week result in substantially greater harvests from the same area. Container growing secrets. Not everyone possesses access to open ground for gardening. Container cultivation offers a solution effective even on balconies, patios, or minuscule backyards. The specialized soil mix formula devised by Amish gardeners guarantees success where numerous container gardens falter. The foundation of the Amish container soil mixture combines equal proportions of compost, garden soil, and coarse sand. This blend retains sufficient moisture to sustain plants while ensuring the drainage that prevents root rot, the primary cause of failure in container plants. For crops requiring more nutrients, such as tomatoes or peppers, they incorporate 1 quart of aged manure to fuel abundant harvests. This balanced medium surpasses costly store-bought potting soils at a mere fraction of the expense. Root vegetables traditionally necessitate deep soil, posing a challenge for container cultivation. Yet Amish gardeners have perfected techniques for growing root crops in bucket. Imaginative container arrangements optimize space efficiency on Amish homesteads. Stair-step configurations ensure each plant obtains adequate sunlight while utilizing vertical space. Hanging containers leverage overhead areas, and window boxes capitalize on unused wall space. One Amish family in Ohio cultivates over 30% of their yearly vegetable requirements entirely in containers within a space no larger than the average living room. Their tiered system utilizes the walls, railings, and even overhead spaces of their modest back porch. Vertical herb spiral construction. Herbs contribute flavor, medicinal properties, and aesthetic appeal to any homestead, yet they frequently possess conflicting cultivation needs. Introducing the herb spiral, a space-conserving solution perfected by Amish gardeners that establishes multiple growing environments within one compact structure. The fundamental design ascends from ground level in a spiral form, typically attaining about 3 ft in height and 5 ft in width. This ingenious arrangement accommodates an impressive 20 or more herb varieties in an area that would normally house just 5 or 6 plants in a conventional flatbed. The spiral configuration creates a pathway exceeding 25 ft in length, while occupying a minimal footprint in my garden. It's akin to possessing a complete herb garden, consuming less space than a dining table. What renders the spiral truly exceptional is its capacity to generate multiple microclimates within a single structure. The apex remains drier with superior drainage, ideal for Mediterranean herbs like rosemary and thyme that favor arid conditions. The central sections offer moderate moisture, suitable for culinary mainstays such as parsley and chives. The lower spirals naturally retain more water, establishing perfect conditions for moisture-loving plants like mint and watercress. These inherent moisture gradients ensure each plant receives precisely what it requires without separate irrigation systems. Building materials frequently originate from the homestead itself in Amish communities. Stones collected from fields, salvaged bricks, or even logs can constitute the structure. The Amish philosophy emphasizes utilizing available resources rather than acquiring new materials. A typical spiral necessitates approximately 200 small stones or 75 bricks, materials that might otherwise remain unused. The soil inside is layered specifically for herbs, featuring coarse material at the core for drainage, topped with rich, well-draining herb soil. Dwarf fruit production techniques. Fresh fruit doesn't necessitate vast tracts of land or prolonged waiting periods. The Amish have pioneered methods for cultivating productive fruit trees in diminutive spaces through specialized pruning and training practices. These approaches yield surprising harvests from minimal area. Espalier training against walls and fences converts fruit trees into space-efficient, two-dimensional structures. This age-old technique involves training branches horizontally along supports, fashioning living sculptures that produce plentiful fruit. An espaliered apple tree might project just 8 inches from a wall while extending 8 feet wide, occupying space that would otherwise remain unused. The practice originated in medieval monasteries where garden space was restricted but has been refined by the Amish for homestead application. When my orchard is flatter than a pancake, I know I'm applying the technique correctly. Selection of ultra-dwarf varieties constitutes the foundation of the Amish strategy for small-space fruit cultivation. These specially bred trees reach maturity at merely 4 to 6 feet tall instead of the 20-plus feet typical of standard varieties. Despite their compact stature, they yield standardized fruits. A single ultra-dwarf peach tree can produce 50 to 75 libes of fruit in an area just 3 ft across. The Amish meticulously choose varieties based on disease resistance and cold hardiness suitable for their local climate, ensuring dependable harvests year after year. Strategic pruning optimizes production in these compact trees. The Amish method entails removing inward-growing branches and preserving an open center to permit sunlight to penetrate all sections of the tree. This strategy enhances fruit production by up to 40% compared to unpruned dwarf trees. Summer pruning, rather than winter pruning, maintains smaller tree size while stimulating greater fruit production. Through these techniques, an Amish family can cultivate apples, peaches, pears, and cherries within an area the size of a small bedroom. Water-saving irrigation hacks. Water scarcity impacts gardens universally, yet Amish communities have devised remarkably efficient irrigation methods that conserve this invaluable resource. Their techniques diminish water consumption while ensuring plants remain healthy even during arid periods. Deep mulch methods are perhaps the most effective water conservation technique in the Amish gardening repertoire. Applying organic mulch at a depth of 4 to 6 inches can decrease watering requirements by an astounding 80%. The mulch layer inhibits evaporation, stabilizes soil temperature, and gradually decomposes to enhance soil structure. Straw, leaves, grass clippings, and wood chips are all utilized depending on local availability. One Amish gardener monitored her water usage before and after adopting deep mulch, discovering she required only 20 gallons weekly for her vegetable garden instead of the prior 100 gallons. Self-watering container systems, derived from traditional Amish designs, operate through basic physics rather than complex mechanisms. A reservoir at the container's base permits water to be drawn upwards into the soil via capillary action as plants require it. These containers lessen watering frequency from daily to merely once or twice weekly. The systems are typically fashioned from common materials like 5-gallon buckets, with one bucket nested inside another. The inner bucket, containing soil and plants, features small holes drilled in its bottom to allow water to seep up from the reservoir beneath. Targeted irrigation supplies water precisely where plants need it most, at the root zone. Amish gardeners frequently employ buried clay pots, ollas, filled with water that gradually permeates through the clay walls into the adjacent soil. A single buried olla can effectively water a 3 ft diameter area for up to a week before requiring replenishment. More intricate systems utilize simple gravity-fed pipes with minuscule holes positioned near plant roots. These methods guarantee that up to 90% of water reaches plants directly instead of being lost to evaporation or weeds. Natural pest management in small spaces. Managing pests without severe chemicals poses a difficulty for any gardener. Over generations, Amish farmers have refined natural approaches that preserve the equilibrium between beneficial and detrimental insects, particularly in compact cultivation areas. Companion planting matrices establish natural pest deterrents throughout the garden. Marigolds planted adjacent to tomatoes lessen nematode damage by up to 70% through chemicals naturally emitted by their roots. Basil enhances tomato flavor while repelling flies and mosquitoes. Nasturtiums function as trap crops for aphids, diverting them from valuable vegetables. The intricate scents and chemicals generated by these combinations confuse insects that typically locate their host plants via smell. It's analogous to searching for someone in a bustling mall where everyone wears identical perfume. Preparing garlic spray pesticide costs mere pennies compared to commercial alternatives and effectively manages a broad spectrum of garden pests. The straightforward recipe utilized in Amish gardens blends crushed garlic cloves, a small quantity of mineral oil, and water. After steeping for 24 hours and straining, the spray disrupts the feeding of soft-bodied pests like aphids and repels numerous others through its potent scent. A 2018 university study determined that homemade garlic spray decreased aphid populations by 75% when applied weekly, nearly equaling the efficacy of commercial insecticidal soaps. Border plantings of aromatic herbs establish protective perimeters around cultivation zones. Strongly scented plants such as rosemary, sage, and lavender planted as hedges confuse insects seeking crop plants. These borders fulfill multiple roles, supplying herbs for culinary and medicinal use while preserving actual garden space from pest intrusion. Each plant emits distinct volatile compounds that conceal the aroma of desirable vegetables. An Amish garden, measuring just 20 x 20 ft, might incorporate a full 2 ft perimeter of these protective plants, forming an unseen shield around valuable crops. Advanced pruning techniques. Plant energy behaves like water flowing in a stream. Proper direction leads to plentiful harvests. Pruning might appear as mere cutting, but in the capable hands of experienced Amish gardeners, it transforms into an art form that substantially boosts yields while maintaining plant health and compactness. Distinguishing energy-depleting growth differentiates novice gardeners from experts. Those small shoots emerging in the junctions of tomato stems, known as suckers, can divert up to 30% of a plant's energy without significantly contributing to the harvest. Amish gardeners inspect their plants weekly, pinching off these suckers before they exceed the size of a pencil eraser. This simple practice redirects energy toward fruit production instead of superfluous foliage. The identical principle applies to numerous fruit plants, where strategic removal of specific growth patterns leads to markedly higher yields. Tomatoes exhibit remarkable responsiveness to appropriate pruning techniques when cultivated in confined areas. The Amish frequently employ the single stem method, removing all suckers compelling the plant to develop one primary stem supported by a stake or string. A correctly pruned, single-stem tomato plant requires just 1 square foot of garden space, yet can yield up to 20 pounds of fruit over a season. Consistency is key, inspecting plants at least weekly during the peak growing period. Training methods that double fruit production involve manipulating pliable stems to foster more productive forms. Cucumber vines trained vertically on strings yield nearly twice the harvest compared to those permitted to sprawl. Vertical growth enhances air circulation, reducing disease issues by up to 80%. Blackberry canes bent horizontally generate considerably more side branches, each producing additional fruit compared to those left growing vertically. These techniques permit Amish families to harvest maximum food from minimal space, transforming diminutive gardens into productive miniature farms. The 3-season stretch method. Cultivating food for only a single season squanders valuable garden space. Year-round production might seem unattainable in colder regions, but Amish gardeners have devised methods to prolong harvests across 3 distinct growing seasons. Their strategy converts the conventional gardening calendar into an ongoing cycle of planting and harvesting. The spring-summer-fall planting schedule provides the framework for the 3-season system. Each garden bed accommodates at least 3 sequential crops throughout the growing duration. An early spring bed containing spinach and lettuce might transition to summer beans, succeeded by fall carrots or kale. This succession maintains constant soil cover and productivity. I know the saying about gardens, they're just compost piles with optimistic signs. Amish gardeners demonstrate this need not be the reality. Planting according to moon phases might seem superstitious, yet research indicates that the gravitational influences of lunar cycles affect seed germination and plant growth. Amish farmers have adhered to these natural rhythms for generations, sowing root crops during the waning moon when gravitational pull is weaker, facilitating easier downward root growth. Above-ground crops like lettuce are planted during the waxing moon when stronger gravitational pull promotes upward growth. Studies at agricultural research facilities have shown that crops planted following these principles often germinate up to 50% faster than those planted without consideration for lunar cycles. Succession planting in restricted areas demands precise timing. Instead of waiting until one crop is entirely finished before planting the subsequent one, Amish gardeners frequently start new seedlings in small containers approximately 2 weeks prior to harvesting the existing crop. This head start enables them to immediately transplant the new crop once the previous one is removed, conserving valuable growing days. A garden bed measuring just 4x8 ft can yield over 200 lobos of fresh vegetables annually when managed with this 3-season approach, roughly 3 times what the same area would produce with conventional single-season planting. Microgreen production system. Year-round fresh greens might appear impossible in a minuscule space, yet the Amish have perfected systems delivering nutrient-rich food, irrespective of season or garden size. Microgreens, young vegetable seedlings harvested mere days after sprouting, concentrate more nutrition into less space than any alternative growing method. From a modest 2 ft x 2 ft area, a continuous microgreen system can supply fresh greens for a family throughout the year. These diminutive powerhouses contain up to 40 times the nutrients of their mature equivalents. A half cup of broccoli microgreens provides the same nutritional value as 2.5 lebs of mature broccoli heads. Amish families integrate these nutritional treasures into their diet, particularly during winter months when fresh garden produce is limited. Swift harvest techniques guarantee a perpetual supply from constrained space. Most microgreens attain harvestable size in just 7 to 14 days, permitting multiple harvests from the same containers each month. By staggering planting dates every 5 to 7 days, Amish gardeners sustain constant production. Shallow trays, merely 2 inches deep, offer sufficient growing medium for the short-lived plants, enabling vertical stacking of multiple growing containers in small areas. The Amish practice of recycling growing medium enhances the system's sustainability. Following harvest, The used soil and root mats are incorporated into compost, where they decompose rapidly owing to their high nitrogen content. This recycled material ultimately returns to the garden, completing the nutrient cycle. Concurrently, new batches of microgreens are cultivated in fresh medium, primarily composed of materials produced on the homestead, compost blended with a small amount of peat moss or coconut coir for moisture retention. This approach sustains production while minimizing external inputs, a defining characteristic of traditional Amish agriculture. High-efficiency potato growing. Potatoes constitute the foundation of food security in numerous Amish communities. These calorie-rich tubers store effectively and offer substantial nutrition, but traditionally demand considerable growing area. The vertical methods developed in Amish gardens convert potato cultivation from space-intensive to space-economical. Layered growing systems permit potatoes to yield abundantly within minimal ground area. The classic Amish potato tower commences with just a small circle of fertile soil where seed potatoes are planted. As the plants ascend, supplementary layers of soil are added, compelling the stems to generate more tubers along their buried sections. A properly managed tower, measuring just 3 ft in diameter, can yield up to 100 levies of potatoes. It's like cultivating a skyscraper when all my neighbors can only construct single-story dwellings. Managing soil pH gradients is crucial for successful vertical potato production. Amish gardeners often establish deliberate layers with slightly varying pH levels to suit different varieties. Lower layers might maintain a pH around 5.8 for varieties favoring more acidic conditions, while upper layers remain closer to 6.5 for types flourishing in less acidic soil. Drainage systems avert waterlogging, the primary threat to potato plants in vertical systems. Traditional Amish towers incorporate vertical drainage conduits fashioned from bundled sticks or perforated pipes positioned in the center of the growing structure. These conduits allow surplus moisture to escape while supplying oxygen to the root zone throughout the tower's height. 4-season mini greenhouse system. Prolonging the growing season beyond natural constraints becomes feasible with appropriately designed small-scale greenhouse structures. The 4 ft by 8 ft greenhouse perfected by Amish gardeners yields food year-round, even in locales experiencing severe winters. Construction materials remain straightforward yet effective in traditional Amish design. The typical frame utilizes locally sourced lumber, frequently cedar or locust chosen for its inherent rot resistance. Covering materials fluctuate by season. 6 mil greenhouse plastic for 3-season application, with an additional interior layer incorporated during winter for supplementary insulation. This double-layer strategy establishes an insulating air pocket that maintains nighttime temperatures up to 15° warmer than single-layer configurations. The compact footprint renders the structure economical while still furnishing sufficient growing space to augment a family's diet throughout the year. Cold-tolerant crops chosen for winter harvesting flourish in these mini greenhouses. Vegetables such as kale, spinach, and specific lettuce varieties persist in producing even when external temperatures descend into the teens. An Amish study group in Pennsylvania recorded harvests from their mini greenhouses averaging 3 to 5 levies of fresh greens weekly throughout January and February, months typically deemed impossible for fresh harvests in northern climates. Cold-hardy herbs like parsley, cilantro, and chives also perform exceptionally well, providing fresh flavors during months when most gardens lie inactive. Heat retention without external energy sources represents perhaps the most remarkable feature of Amish greenhouse design. Thermal mass, in the form of water-filled black containers, absorbs solar energy during daylight hours and releases it gradually overnight. Correctly positioned, these thermal batteries sustain temperatures adequate to prevent freezing even during the coldest nights. The north wall of many Amish greenhouses incorporates stone, brick, or even stacked water jugs painted black to maximize heat retention. Insulated shutters often close manually at dusk and open at dawn to minimize nighttime heat loss through the transparent walls and roof. These passive systems maintain growing temperatures without electricity or fossil fuels, a practical necessity in Amish communities and a sustainable approach for anyone. Season extension techniques. While complete greenhouses offer maximal protection, simpler methods can extend the growing season by weeks or even months. Low-cost season extenders, developed by Amish gardeners, permit nearly year-round production without significant infrastructure expenditure. Repurposed windows gain renewed purpose as cold frames in numerous Amish gardens. These elementary structures, essentially bottomless boxes topped with windows, create sheltered growing areas that warm rapidly on sunny days. Soil temperature within a well-designed cold frame typically stays 10 to 15 degrees warmer than the surrounding garden soil. This differential allows cold season crops to thrive long after unprotected plants have yielded to frost. A standard window cold frame measuring 3 ft by 6 ft can yield enough salad greens for a family from late autumn through early spring with appropriate crop selection and management. Talk about making my windows genuinely illuminating. Row covers devised by Amish gardeners add 30 or more days to both extremities of the growing season. Unlike commercial counterparts, these homemade systems utilize materials readily available on the homestead. Simple hoops constructed from flexible saplings or repurposed electrical conduit form low tunnels over planted rows. Covering materials vary from lightweight floating row covers for insect defense to heavier plastic. Strategic positioning within the garden generates natural microclimates that prolong growing seasons without supplementary structures. South-facing walls or fences reflect sunlight and obstruct cold northern winds, establishing protected growing zones that warm early in spring and retain heat later in autumn. Stone walls or pathways absorb daytime heat and release it overnight, moderating temperature variations. Raised beds with stone borders function similarly, providing gentle warmth to plant roots. Amish gardeners capitalize on these natural effects by situating cold-sensitive crops in these sheltered niches, often obtaining 2 to 3 extra weeks of growing time without any additional gear or cost. Perennial food strategies. Looking beyond annual vegetables unveils a realm of plants producing year after year with minimal exertion. Perennial food crops form the cornerstone of self-reliance in many Amish communities, offering dependable harvests while lessening the labor of annual planting. Space-efficient perennial vegetables chosen by generations of Amish gardeners yield impressive returns for small homesteads. Asparagus, once established, produces for 20 years or more, while occupying a remarkably compact area. A 4 ft x 8 ft asparagus bed can yield up to 20 libs annually, sufficient for fresh consumption plus preservation. Egyptian walking onions, rhubarb, and sorrel flourish in areas as small as 2 ft square while returning yearly without replanting. These time-proven plants transform small spaces into perpetual food sources. Maintenance demands decrease significantly with properly established perennials. Most necessitate only annual mulching, periodic division, and seasonal harvesting. Jerusalem artichokes, a dietary staple in many Amish gardens, require virtually no attention once established. A single square yard planting can yield 15 pounds or more of nutritious tubers annually with zero upkeep beyond harvesting. This efficiency becomes vital in sustaining food production during hectic seasons when other garden duties require attention. Amish gardeners adeptly integrate medicinal and culinary herbs within their food production systems. Perennial herbs like thyme, oregano, sage, and mint serve multiple functions, enhancing meals, addressing common health issues, and attracting beneficial insects. These valuable plants frequently occupy edges and borders, converting otherwise unused areas into productive zones. Lemon balm and catnip deter pest insects while supplying calming teas. The deliberate interplanting of culinary and medicinal species throughout the garden, rather than confining them to a distinct herb garden, maximizes both space efficiency and beneficial interactions. Space-efficient food storage solutions. Cultivating abundant food addresses only half the predicament. Correctly storing that harvest completes the self-sufficiency puzzle. Amish households have devised clever storage methods that preserve harvests without necessitating large dedicated areas or electricity. Numerous root cellars fashioned from 5-gallon buckets convert small spaces into effective storage systems. The technique involves burying food-grade buckets up to their rims in shaded spots, then filling them with layers of moist sand, alternating with root vegetables like carrots, beets, and turnips. A second bucket, inverted over the top and weighted with a heavy rock, creates a basic seal. These bucket cellars maintain temperatures between 35 degrees and 45 degrees throughout winter, ideal for root crop preservation. An Amish family using just 6 such buckets can store over 100 lbs of root vegetables in a combined area smaller than a coffee table. Those sophisticated refrigerator crisper drawers suddenly appear rather demanding by comparison. The cool corner method, adapted by Amish families residing in smaller dwellings, permits food storage without dedicated root cellars. This approach pinpoints naturally cooler sections within the home, often north-facing corners of basements or pantries, and modifies them for optimal storage conditions. Simple shelving fitted with cloth curtains creates microclimates where different foods receive suitable humidity and temperature levels. Onions and garlic hang in mesh bags where air circulation prevents sprouting, while squash and pumpkins are placed on shelves where regular inspection allows prompt use of any showing signs of deterioration. These arrangements maintain orderly food storage while maximizing available space. Modular storage systems developed in Amish communities adjust to shifting seasonal requirements. Shelving units designed for straightforward reconfiguration permit the same space to accommodate different crops as seasons change. Early autumn might find shelves spaced broadly for curing winter squash, whereas later arrangements provide tighter spacing for jars of preserved foods. This flexibility enables tiny homes to store substantial food reserves by modifying storage density throughout the year. These Amish gardening techniques illustrate that plentiful food production doesn't necessitate expansive acreage. By merging careful planning, space-efficient methods, and generations of accumulated knowledge, anyone can cultivate a year's supply of food even on the most diminutive homestead. The key isn't increased space, it's more intelligent cultivation.